May 24th, 1940, midday. 340,000 British soldiers are backed against the cold, gray water of the English Channel. On a ridge northwest of Arras, General Heinz Guderian lowers his heavy binoculars. The sharp smell of burning diesel and cordite coats his throat. Below him, the steel tracks of the 11th Panzer Division churn the damp earth, grinding across the Aue Canal. The target, Dunkirk, sits exactly 12 miles away. The German war machine is primed, engines idling with mechanical precision. Yet, the radio transmission about to arrive will not command in advance. It will force the apex predator to halt. It is a single piece of paper that will eventually burn the Third Reich to the ground. March 1936. The rhythmic thud of hobnailed boots echoes across the stone bridges of the Rhineland. German infantrymen march forward, palms sweating against the cold wood of their Mauser rifles. They carry secret orders to retreat immediately if the French fire a single shot. The career World War II German generals in Berlin hold their breath. They read the troop manifests. They know the army is too weak for a real fight. They advise caution. Adolf Hitler ignores them. He rolls the dice. The French do nothing. The bluff works. 4 years later, the pattern repeats. The generals stare at the dense pine forests of the Ardennes. They point to the narrow dirt roads. They argue that heavy tank divisions cannot squeeze through. The dictator brushes their academy training aside. He orders the armor forward. Branches scrape against gray steel. The sharp scent of crushed pine needles mixes with thick exhaust fumes as tank treads chew through the supposedly impassable woods. Another impossible bet. Another swift victory. This is where the fatal poison takes root. The professional military men, tacticians who calculate fuel consumption and artillery ranges, begin to doubt their own science. They watch a former corporal rewrite the rules of war on pure instinct. The map room dynamic shifts. Experience is replaced by blind faith. The dictator looks at the men with the iron crosses and realizes he no longer needs their advice. He has beaten the house odds twice. He believes he cannot lose. The generals stand quietly in the shadows of the command tents. They realize their lifelong expertise is becoming entirely obsolete. The German army is winning the early battles, but the foundation rests on a gambler's luck. And at Dunkirk, the dice are still in the air. Disagree and you are disloyal. That is the new, unspoken law breathing down the necks of the German high command. You can feel it in the stifling, stale air of the briefing tents. Men who spent decades studying supply lines and flanking maneuvers now bite their tongues. They stare at the topographic maps. They grip their red grease pencils tight enough to snap the wood, but they say nothing. The dictator in Berlin looks at the paper and trusts his gut over their math. He believes his instinct is a sharper weapon than any artillery barrage. He strips the momentum right out from under his own tank tracks. At Dunkirk, the armor sits idle. The engines cool off. The heavy steel hulls settle deep into the damp French mud. Why risk the precious armor? Hermann Goering promises the Air Force can finish the trapped British from the sky. It sounds easy on paper. Just send the bombers. The frontline generals know better. They hear the distant, uneven drone of aircraft engines fighting the coastal crosswinds. They know bombs dropped through thick sea fog cannot break dug-in infantry. War is fought in the dirt.
You have to put boots on the throat of a cornered enemy to make sure he stays down. Logic no longer drives the German machine. Blind obedience is the only currency that buys survival in the map room. The tacticians stand rigid. Their coarse wool uniforms scratch against sweating skin. They watch a lethal command structure rot from the inside out. They wait for the radio to crackle with the order to move forward. The clock steadily ticks away on a trapped army's survival.
"16 hours. That is exactly how long the tank divisions sit idle in the coastal dirt. When Army Group A finally lifts the halt order, the steel gears grind, but the window is gone. Out on the beaches of Dunkirk, the British do not waste a minute. Gray destroyers and wooden fishing boats bob in the salt spray. They haul away 1,000 men per vessel. General Guderian lowers his binoculars in disgust. The prey slips right through the net. Fast forward to November 1942. The wind sweeping across the Russian steppe feels like razor blades against exposed skin. 300,000 German soldiers are encircled inside the ruined factories. The soft dirt of France is replaced by the hardened, bloody ice of the Volga River. Down in the frozen trenches, infantrymen blow into their cracked hands. They listen closely. Through the howling wind, they hear it. The heavy, rhythmic thump of friendly artillery. The 6th Panzer Division punches through the Soviet lines. The rescue columns push hard, leaving black soot against the white snow. Then, they stall. The distance between the trapped men and salvation is exactly 30 miles. 30 miles of frozen earth. The encircled soldiers wait for the order to break out. They check their stiff rifle bolts. They ready their empty canvas packs. They want to live. But the radio barks a different command from Berlin. Stay put. Do not give up an inch of ground. The men sit in the ice. They listen to the distant artillery fade into the freezing night. They are ordered to die in place rather than walk 30 miles toward survival. The trap snaps shut. The metallic scrape of dull steel against frozen bone echoes through the shattered brickwork during the Battle of Stalingrad, December 1942. Men with black, frostbitten fingers grip their bayonets. They hack desperately at the carcass of a dead artillery horse. The meat is solid as granite. In a crumbling basement nearby, infantryman Wilhelm Hoffmann huddles over his dirt-stained notebook. He blows onto his stiff hands and writes that the Supreme Commander has promised to do everything necessary to ensure supplies and rapidly break the encirclement. He believes the confident voice crackling on the radio. He thinks he is part of a grand tactical maneuver. He does not know he is already a crossed-out statistic on a map in Berlin. January 24th, 1943. The heavy rumble of Soviet tank treads crushes the snow at the final German-held airfield. The last transport plane lifts off the cratered runway. The supply cord is permanently severed. Down in the dark, smelling of gangrene and unwashed bodies inside a collapsed department store, General Friedrich Paulus stands over a buzzing radio set. He transmits oblique arithmetic directly to the wolf's lair. 0 rations remaining. 0 ammunition. 18,000 wounded soldiers lying on the freezing concrete without a single clean bandage or drop of morphine. Paulus asks for permission to surrender. He begs to save his remaining men from the ice. The response from East Prussia comes back cold and precise. Stand fast. Fight to the last man. The radio operator quietly powers down the transmitter. 300,000 men are officially ordered to bleed out in the rubble. Their commander sits in the dark, waiting for a final telegram that carries a very specific, lethal implication. The crisp crinkle of heavy telegraph paper cuts through the damp, sewage-scented air of the Universe store basement. January 30th, 1943. Friedrich Paulus stands chest-deep in human waste, rotting bandages, and the metallic stench of dried blood. He reads the fresh ink. Berlin has just promoted him to Field Marshal. It is not a reward. It is a loaded gun placed on a table. The unwritten rule echoes in the dark. No German Field Marshal has ever been captured alive. The promotion is a suicide command. The dictator expects Paulus to put a bullet in his own head rather than surrender. Paulus folds the paper. He chooses to live. The system cracks. 17 months later, the crack becomes a canyon. June 6, 1944. Dawn. The gray waters of Normandy churn with landing craft. Artillery shells pound the French sand. Thousands of Allied boots hit the shingle. Hundreds of miles away, inside the thick concrete walls of the Wolf's Lair, Adolf Hitler is asleep. Outside his heavy wooden bedroom door, high-ranking staff officers stand frozen. They listen to the muffled ticking of their wristwatches. They hold urgent dispatches. They are too scared to knock. The fear of waking the dictator paralyzes the entire command structure. Out on the coast, the 21st Panzer Division sits parked in the cold rain, exactly 30 meters from the tree line. The crews listen to the naval bombardment tearing their infantry apart. They grip their steel steering levers. They wait for the green light. The approval to move finally comes down the wire at 1600 hours. A fatal 12-hour delay. The tank commanders silently watch an enemy that has already conquered the sand. June 7th, 1944. The Normandy coastline smells of salt water, damp canvas, and burning phosphorus. The Allied war machine does not wait for Berlin to wake up. While German tank divisions remain parked behind the tree line, 156,000 American, British, and Canadian soldiers secure the French sand. Within 5 days, 326,000 troops and 54,000 vehicles roll off the steel landing craft. The earth vibrates under the heavy tread of advancing Sherman tanks. The enemy ruthlessly exploits a paralyzed command structure. Over 500 miles away, the dictator stands above his wooden map table. He taps a red grease pencil on Pas de Calais. He insists the Normandy invasion is a mere diversion. He holds his elite reserve units firmly in place. He leaves his coastal infantry to face the naval bombardment alone, waiting for a phantom army that will never arrive. The exact same rigidity fractures the Eastern Front. The Soviet forces remember the frozen starvation of Stalingrad. They know the German doctrine dictates holding ground at all costs. On June 22nd, the Red Army unleashes 2 million men and 4,000 tanks. Soviet artillery fires in a continuous, heavy rhythm, systematically erasing the German trench lines. Field commanders radio headquarters, begging to fall back to defensible terrain. The receiver spits back the usual command: stand fast. The Allies and the Soviets march forward with mechanical precision. They simply step through the massive tactical doors left wide open by a single man's stubborn refusal to adapt. The borders of the Third Reich rapidly collapse inward. The dictator pulls his remaining forces back, retreating into a subterranean concrete box, where the colored pins on his map no longer reflect the bleeding men above. April 1945. The air inside the Berlin bunker tastes like stale sweat, damp wool, and leaking generator exhaust. 50 feet of reinforced concrete separates the subterranean command room from the street. It is thick enough to block the daylight, but it cannot stop the violent vibrations. Soviet artillery shells detonate just 200 meters above the ceiling. Fine gray dust drifts down from the ventilation shafts, settling onto the wooden tables. General Heinz Guderian stands in the dim, flickering light. He keeps his mouth shut. He watches a broken man lean over a frayed topographic chart. The dictator's left hand shakes uncontrollably. He holds a colored pencil. He drags it across the surface, ordering the 9th Army and the Steiner detachment to launch a massive pincer movement. The room goes dead silent. The staff officers stare at their polished boots. They know the arithmetic. The Steiner detachment is a ghost division. Those units were wiped out in the mud months ago. They are already dead. Yet their supreme commander continues to move them around the board like wooden toy soldiers. Up on the burning streets, 14-year-old boys clutch oversized rifles. They bleed to death on the shattered bricks of their own neighborhoods. Down in the bunker, the dictator stubbornly refuses to look at the grim casualty reports. He lives entirely inside the colored margins of his map. The man who once bypassed the Ardennes and conquered France now issues precise tactical orders to phantoms. The heavy steel door seals the high command inside. The artillery strikes draw closer, measuring the final distance between a ruler's delusion and the brutal reality waiting just outside. April 30th, 1945, around 15:30 hours. The heavy steel door of the private quarters clicks shut. Inside, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun stand alone. A single gunshot cracks through the damp concrete halls. The bitter irony hangs thick in the cordite smoke. The Supreme Commander, who coldly ordered 300,000 men to freeze and starve in the rubble of Stalingrad rather than take one step backward, immediately puts a bullet in his own head the second he faces an encirclement of his own. Years later, General Heinz Guderian would trace the ashes of Berlin all the way back to the French mud. He evaluated that first halted tank advance at Dunkirk as one of Hitler's biggest mistakes, calling it the tactical decision with the most ruinous influence on the war. Dictatorial control built the machine, but blind arrogance buried it.